Thanks for listening to the Open Discourse podcast. In this series, ODC co-founder and CEO Charles Mitchell sits down for a candid conversation with thought leaders, elected officials, entrepreneurs, and more. Today, he is joined by Kimberlee Josephson, ODC's visiting academic fellow and an associate professor of business administration at Lebanon Valley College.
Kimberlee Josephson, welcome to the Open Discourse podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure to have the first college professor I've ever met who writes articles about Mr. Miyagi on this podcast. So let's start there. Why did you write, in addition to your scholarly responsibilities that we'll get into, why did you write an article about what today's students should learn from Mr. Miyagi?
Yeah, well, as a business professor, I really try to take complex topics and make them fun and interesting. And I love pop culture, and I love kind of going back to my roots as an 80s kid and some of those 90s classic films and everything. So the Foundation for Economic Education has been publishing a lot of my pieces, and especially when they have to do with pop culture. So I actually have some articles on Tommy Boy. I have an article on Twister and kind of paying homage to the original Twister. But Karate Kid is something that, oh man, I just loved that growing up. So I loved Karate Kid Part 1 and Part 2, and I always loved Mr. Miyagi's lessons. And one of them that really resonates with me is, never to put passion before principle, because even if win, you lose. And it really is taking things down to first principles. So I'm a big fan of Thomas Sowell and his work, right? And his books often kind of try to break things down to first principles and really dissecting the situation and what's going on. And so I feel like that quote is just so applicable, Mr. Miyagi's quote. And also even just the perseverance, the loyalty that's involved in that movie, in Karate Kid. If you haven't seen it, I implore you, please check it out and watch it. But just to see the dedication that both Ralph Macchio, so Daniel, and Mr. Miyagi, what they have for each other and how they really utilize their relationship to advance themselves in a variety of ways. And once again, the perseverance and the dedication that's involved. And then also, staying true to oneself. I think that has a really strong message. And I, as a business professor, am incredibly biased in that I am very pro entrepreneurs and business owners. And I think that they're just the heroes and the champions. And a lot of what we see in these films is, having to put up with adversity and uncertainty and, mitigating risks and how am I going to navigate this and how am I going to compete? And so there's just so many little ways in which we can connect, what we see in movies to what happens in the business world. So I just kind of like to tap into those ideas and make it a little bit more palatable too for those readers who maybe have an interest in Karate Kid but not in entrepreneurship, or vice versa, entrepreneurship but want to be thinking a little bit more outside the box in terms of how it applies.
That's great, Kimberlee. I love the way you can seize upon topics like 80s or 90s pop culture or all sorts of other things, which we'll get into in the balance of this conversation, and use them to get the attention of readers or your students, and I've been in your classroom, as you know, onto important topics like business and entrepreneurship and capitalism. Now, you've already made it clear you're a professor. A lot of our viewers and listeners have been affiliated in one way, shape, or form with Bucknell University. So let me make sure they know that unlike a lot of our other guests, you are not at Bucknell. You are not a Bucknellian. You did go to a BU school. We'll get into that. But you're a tenured professor at Lebanon Valley College. You've taught at a bunch of other institutions. We'll get into that. And it's in that capacity that you're writing these articles for the Foundation for Economic Education and all sorts of other organizations. And yes, part of, I think, how we connected is your defense of capitalism. One of the four co-founders of the Open Discourse Coalitions, the guy who we like to say wrote the book on capitalism, Ken Langone, wrote the book, I Love Capitalism. So certainly when I started reading you online, that got my attention. And most recently, as you know, I'd like to make sure our listeners know that you've become a visiting academic fellow with the Open Discourse Coalition. And in that capacity, I spent some time in your class recently as did our senior fellow, Bill Groover. I think it'd be great
Yes.
for our audience to know a little bit more. Why did you have a professor from another institution in your class? What caused you to accept that opportunity for your students?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons is fortunately, I've been invited to speak at other institutions as well. So I feel like when students have someone external to their the classroom experience, it kind of shakes things up a little bit. And so usually they pay a little bit more attention. That outside individual maybe is perceived as having more credibility. I also think it's really beneficial to show the power of networking and just how, so my name's Dr. Josephson, but I go by Dr. J in the classroom to just kind of keep it simple. Actually, my students know I kind of had a speech impediment growing up and I trip over words. And so even my own last name when I got married and it was Josephson, I sometimes would stumble over. So just keep it Dr. J. So I feel like, when they can see that, wow, Dr. J is connected to this really impressive individual, it's kind of like, how did that happen? Right. And how did that get started? And even, I share that journey with them of how I get to partake in some really cool events or even speak at different institutions or in a different capacity at a conference. Something with the Foundation for Economic Education, I actually taught some sessions down in Atlanta to some of their teacher fellows. So people who teach economics at the pretty much the high school level, and getting to talk to them about economics and what does capitalism mean and what is entrepreneurship and how can we make this kind of fun in a classroom environment. I'm also a speaker for the Heterodox Academy, so I get invited to talk about free market principles. So I love getting to go to other places, but I love when I can bring people, especially who are super impressive, like Professor Bill Groover, into the classroom. Because once again, I think it actually gives me a little bit of notoriety in that, wow, Dr. J knows so-and-so. And you can see it on their faces where they perk up a little bit when they get to hear someone who's got a substantial real world experience. So, I'm a business professor, but I never worked on Wall Street. So being able to bring someone in with, once again, such a rich history or who has had clients or had contacts in a world outside of mine, I think just adds such a value to the classroom. And the students, I had one student who afterwards almost seemed like a little bit in a daze in that he said to me, wow, he knows a lot. And I said, yeah. And I said, and feel free to reach out. I know that Professor Groover would probably be very, very welcoming of it, but it was just the way he even said it was really funny. Like, wow, he knows a lot. And it was more in terms of just that wealth of experience, right? Just having so much background in a variety of capacities of the positions that Professor Groover held, and then even what he's involved with present day. So an outsider perspective is always great. Actually coming up, so I'm going to be doing a short-term study abroad program with some LVC students, and we're going to go to Belfast. But I always feel like students pay more attention when another student talks about the experience. So it's all well and good for me to try to promote and sell something. It's better to have someone else. So in the business realm, we say that, having someone with credibility or having someone with that life experience or the direct connection is much more powerful. And so for Professor Groover to come in and talk about personal selling as someone who found immense success in that regard, I think it was huge, and we really enjoyed it. And he's welcome back anytime if he's listening.
He'll definitely be listening. I want to ask you one other question about that. So you mentioned Bill talked about personal selling when he was at Lebanon Valley. Can you just give our audience a little more of a window into what does that mean? What was that about? What transpired in your classroom, and what was the value that you saw in it?
Yeah, well, what was so nice too. So the talk was for my marketing students, and in marketing, we actually do learn the textbook version of 7 Steps of Personal Selling, which actually, depending on the textbook, it can vary in terms of steps and things like that. And so Professor Groover gave his own kind of view of these are the right approaches for working through that process of engagement with a client and how you go about closing a sale. But he made it very just common sense though too, right? There are just some basic things in regards to like prospecting of identifying who are your, potential leads. Not everyone needs to be contacted or engaged with, and you have to be very judicious with the information and the time and effort that you put into a client, right? And then Professor Groover talked about, doing your homework and even schmoozing with the client. So being able to connect. We have there's that business saying it's not business, it's personal, but really it is, right? It's all about networking. And right now in the marketing realm, a lot of emphasis is on customer relationship management, right? And I tell my marketing students in regards to sales and in regards to messaging, it really is about trying to establish that relationship, right? If you want to have a positive relationship, you need to have open forms of communication. You need to really understand and get that person. So, for example, I think a lot of students, it feels a little off-putting when you hear about all the data that is collected about customers. But also, on the other hand, this is marketers wanting to really understand you, right? If you want to go on a date with someone, what do they like to eat? Where do they like to go? What gets their attention? What's going to, and it's all about surprising and delighting them, right? So if I'm picking out, so we have the holiday season coming about. I want my husband, when he opens up a gift from me, to go, wow, she gets me, right? I want him to be surprised, but I want it to apply to something that he needs or wants. And I want it to signal like, hey, I really value this relationship and I care about you so much. I want to make sure that when you open this gift, it really like, wow, she gets me. And that's what, effective marketers are really trying to do is they want to understand you so they can best serve your wants and needs. And we're in such a competitive environment that can change on a dime what a customer wants and needs, right? So, our wants are really kind of culturally and culturally determined and then even subjective. So that process of personal selling too is like you have to dig even deeper now to really understand how you're going to best satisfy, right? And I love how Professor Groover even applied his examples to like how this impacts students. So something with like always be closing, right? So always be closing the sale, not viewing it as an end of the relationship, but how can I further this, right? And also how can I constantly put the ball in their court? So something that I talked about with my students afterwards was, if you're in an interview, when your prospective employer, when you're all done with the interview, what do you do for always be closing? And some of them are, oh, you say thank you, and they would get warmer and warmer, just like how Professor Groover did the exercise of, okay, go deeper, and instead of saying like, I look forward to hearing from you, say, when can I expect to hear from you? I'm so excited about this opportunity, yep. Right? And so even that, like you could see the light bulbs on in their eyes, oh, okay, yes, that's how we do it, right? And so just working through those steps of personal selling with Professor Groover, I think will have a real lasting impact on my students.
That's awesome. Delighted to facilitate that lasting impact. Now, in terms of practicing what you preach, I'm delighted that we're going to welcome you to Bucknell in 2026. And I do want to get to that in a minute. Now, to frame up why, though, you talked earlier about how you believe entrepreneurs and capitalists are heroes.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, oh my goodness. I think as someone who grew up with, my father ran his own, he had a partnership and he ran a dental lab. As someone who's married to a man who is really, running his own business, as someone who has benefited from so many different products and services, right? Even going back to, things that we didn't have as kids in the 80s that now my kids have. It's just amazing the advancements that we've seen, but also it is just so hard to find success in business, right? A lot of small businesses operate on razor thin profit margins, right? So in terms of even grocery and retail, we're really at like 3 to 6% profit margin, right? So they take on great risk in being producers, right? So I really champion for those who want to try to commercialize and capitalize on different opportunities. I really see that as being heroic. Not everybody can be a business owner. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur. And I always distinguish between entrepreneurship and an inventor, right? For my students, because you don't have to necessarily be someone who invents something completely novel and new, right? If I open up a pizza shop, pizza's already been invented, right? But I can be an entrepreneur in how I generate value for that town that I serve and providing the pizza, right? Something else that I talk about in class a lot is for those of us who can't take on the risk of being an entrepreneur, you should pursue intrapreneurship. So within an organization, how can you make that organization more valuable, more profitable, more efficient with your processes, right? So really, now I'm also going to be honest in that, yeah, you have some bad business professionals out there. There are bad apples in every industry, every sector, right? But most of us do business with most of us have family members and loved ones who work for businesses, own businesses, and really it is that kind of wealth creation and the added value that makes our economy just continue to grow. And I think it's so funny when you have business in movies. It's always the business person who's the villain, right? And when we talk about profit, students, it's almost like they always want to shy away from that word profit. And really profit is that tool, the tool that you're doing something right. And if people are willing to pay and pay you, and you're able to accrue a profit from it, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just good business. So yeah, I'm a big fan of anyone who's willing to take on those risks, the uncertainty, the stress, and also it does take not just an investment of money, but an investment of time and effort, right? A business is almost like having a baby, and you never know how it's actually going to turn out, and all the sleepless nights and all the just wondering how things are going to pan out. So I think that we should really be champions for our business owners.
You made a really interesting comment there, Kimberlee, about the attitude that your students have towards the very idea of profit. And look, this is coming from somebody who's spent his career building and running organizations that are colloquially referred to as nonprofits. So, interesting source for the question. But I agree with you that, in especially the generation that's being educated right now, there's this reflexive thing of a profit either being a dirty word or being something to minimize, and we have to talk about social benefit and so forth. And I'm in favor of social benefit, right? I mean, I'm literally sitting under the logo of a social benefit kind of organization, but it is a very interesting thing that's happened culturally. Would you say that since you became a professor, not just at Lebanon Valley, but you've taught at numerous institutions, as we talked about, is this a change that you've observed over time, this attitude with respect to profit and capitalism?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think what is a little off-putting too is I think the emphasis has also been focused on the purpose in a way that it hampers the learning of the principles. So for example, students are more interested on the impact, not on, oh, okay, how do I do accounting? And how do I ensure that, I'm covering my fixed costs? And okay, if I want to register my business with the state, right? So it's just some of the fundamentals. So I feel like
without which you can't make an impact, right? I mean, I think that's what you're saying.
Correct. So yeah, so there's been a real growth, especially since around 2005 and then 2000. Oh yeah, because actually, if you remember Tom's Shoes in like 2006, so cause-related marketing campaigns and just kind of these different initiatives that really, so Bono's Red campaign and things that really emphasize conscious consumerism, right? And having a purpose to your purchase. And it was very appealing. And so you had a lot of different social entrepreneurship programs come about. Like, how can we do more? So how can we leverage, actually Michael Porter, who is, kind of synonymous with business education. So he's a Harvard business professor. He's got all these different frameworks and models that are great for students to learn. So Porter's Five Forces, Porter's Diamond Model. So he's in every textbook. But he has a concept called shared value. So how do we meet social needs as well as economic needs, simultaneously, which can be great, but also sometimes you just focus on the economic needs, and actually that takes care of the social needs, right? So like one of my favorite examples is something that really freed up the opportunity for women to enter into the workforce was the washing machine. Right? No one invented the washing machine as okay, we want this for women empowerment. But if you think about the traditional household duties back when it was first, right, it really freed up opportunity and time for women who wanted to enter into the workforce or pursue other things. So we don't know what's going to have a social impact until you do. And so I think trying to embed that higher purpose, or the higher calling, I think it's distracting to students. And it also downplays just the value of, hey, if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to be a florist, do arrangements, whatever it is that you want to do, like that's a value. That's a social impact in and of itself.
Because if it wasn't valuable, people wouldn't pay you money for it, right?
Correct.
And it's an interesting point you make. Okay.
Yeah. And that profit, it's just a signal, right?
Yep.
That tells me I'm being efficient with my operations and my value creation is actually worth it. If I wasn't profiting, I'd have to make an adjustment. So and that's also, once again, going back to, capitalism and free market systems is which we don't, we have a mixed economic system. If we had a truly laissez-faire free market system, it is voluntary. Right? So you always have the option to buy or not to buy. So even when there's concerns about monopoly, something that we talked about in class is if you have monopoly power, sometimes as it's more efficient to have one provider or one producer than more. And it's okay to have a monopoly if the consumer is happy. Right? If you don't need other options, you don't need other options. And going back to just how the basic fundamentals of when you think about the transaction, as long as it's voluntary and as long as there's value creation, it is going to have a positive impact on society.
It's a really interesting way to think about it, right? Whoever invented the washing machine didn't do it so that you could have a job. They did it to make money. But the effect is that you and many others like you can have a job. It makes me think, Kimberlee, of an interesting conversation I had with a young man who, he's a friend of my family, didn't know what he wanted to do in life. He was in a really yucky situation in a college. Basically, I don't want to say he was defrauded, but he was marketed in a way that wasn't quite virtuous as to, why he should be there. It didn't work, had some financial troubles, etc. And to make a long story short, he had to leave the institution and he had to figure out what he's going to do. And where is he now? He's at Home Depot, created by Ken Langone, who wrote the book I Love Capitalism, and Bernie Marcus and some others. And I think about that through the same lens as what you say about the washing machine. Like Ken and Bernie didn't create Home Depot so that a young man in rural Pennsylvania could write his life. They created it to make money. But the effect of building that flourishing institution where people are treated fairly and where someone without a college degree can have a family-sustaining job has been to sustain innumerable families where somebody like this young man could get an opportunity and could build a career. I think that's, as I think about it, that's what you're driving at. It's not to say we don't like that social benefit or whatever you want. We like it very much. The question is, how do you get most of it? The way you get most of it is that signal that has become kind of unpopular, the dirty word profit.
Right. And also to ever downplay what it is that someone does. I feel like, once again, everything has value in the process of exchange. Yeah. So who are you to determine what someone offers or what someone opts for, right? So I'm even thinking, that wealth I was joking with my students the other day because we were talking about prices and we were talking about how, yeah, in terms of a captive market or even in regards to situational, context, how that can vary. So I said how like Halloween candy, it's in high demand. And then the day after, if it's got, a spider or bats or packaging that signals Halloween, the day after it's half price and marked down until the inventory is moved. And I told my students, I said, I remember, when there was a time when my husband and I were first married, and we weren't in an overly popular area anyway, but we didn't have much in terms of purchasing power. And it's like you just kind of prayed, nobody came to the house, you turn the lights off because candy's expensive, right? But when you are profiting, when you are doing well, yes, you're going to buy those extra Girl Scout cookies. Yes, you're going to put a little bit more maybe in the offering plate. Or yes, even on campus, we have different programs. We have the Dutchman Pantry and we have the Career Closet. And when you do well, you're able to then use that as you see fit. And this is actually an area of interest for me. So I do a lot of research and talks on corporate social responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can have organizations that really kind of get out of their lane or they are entering into areas where they don't have that competency. I think it's best, for the larger organizations, they can scale. And so they, are able to have a big impact with, what it is that they do donation wise. So, I'm hesitant to say pull back completely, but I think it's always great if you can decentralize that process. And so, if you can pay your employees more and your employees then can put that money towards community projects or programs or things that they support or different initiatives. I think sometimes you have some organizations where they impose their own maybe personal views or values that can be a disconnect to what the company does or even to the interests of employees if it puts the company in jeopardy later on. So that's just something else that I'm kind of interested in because it's a tough thing. Like same thing with studies on foreign aid. You don't want to say like don't give, but we also know that, it doesn't really help a local economy when you provide free goods and resources, right? So how do we create these kind of virtuous circles of economic development versus just more of a dependency-based relationship? And so sometimes you have these larger organizations, and then if there's a change in power, that dependency relationship could be very problematic.
Yeah. Kimberlee, when we got going on capitalism earlier, you used a 4-letter word, especially in the academy, bias. You said, I have a bias towards capitalism and towards entrepreneurship. You do a lot of writing and speaking. You're doing some of that speaking right now. I'm a fan of your writing. When you say that, it makes me curious, what's your posture in your classroom? If you say you have a bias, right? Is your goal as a teacher to inculcate positive views of capitalism? Do you have students hear about socialism in your class? I mean, how does that, you use the word, right? So how does that bias play out in your classroom?
Yeah, so I think my role as an educator is to teach you how to think, not what to think. But I think it's also important for students to know where you're coming from too. So I do teach the difference between capitalism and socialism because it is in the textbook. So actually even my one course, like that's, that's the chapter, that's the focus, right? But also the other thing is I know most of these students, they're studying to they want to launch their own business. We're based out of Central PA, so a lot of the students are actually looking to take over the family business. So I want them to have pride in what it is that they're pursuing. I don't want the business major to be seen as kind of the black sheep program in a liberal arts institution. I want it to be seen as something that is heroic and something that they should feel, proud of and feel challenged by. It's not easy to be in business. And so, students know that I am a capitalist. I think I get a free pass because I am a business professor. So it's kind of, comes with, that realm. But yeah, the students know that. But also that being said, too, I make it very clear that there is so much in terms of how the world changes and even nothing is certain or guaranteed. So even my understanding or things that I studied in college and how it's shifted and changed, right? So I think it's super important to have as so open discourse, right, coalition. So it's not just about learning, it's about their engagement and their interest in wanting to have a conversation and realizing that some of these are thoughts, and a lot of what happens in the business world, we don't know it's going to be successful till it's successful, right? And the business world is also, winners and losers aren't guaranteed. So nothing is kind of as clear cut as you'd think. So I'm a champion for those that want to pursue it, and I'm a champion for those that also seek to be challenged and have autonomy and want to empower themselves. There's a great saying that and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I love the saying. It's about a formal education will make you a living, self-education will make you a fortune. So just also encouraging students like, well, you have to figure out, why do these principles matter to you? And also, where does it come down to? So once again, going back to even capitalism and socialism, I don't say one is good or one is bad. I say, this is the standard under this system. This is the standard under this system, right? And so just dissecting, okay, in regards to private property, right? In regards to profit orientation, in regards to common good versus individual advancement, right? And we can see that there are some nuances where, well, yeah, we want for the common good, but also can individual advancement lead to then a more just society? I mean, that was even Adam Smith. He wrote the theory of moral sentiments before the Wealth of Nations. And it was, how do we make for a society where people are going to care about each other? Well, you care about people that you transact with, and you create relationships and networks with people that you can benefit from. And if you have that happen, oh my goodness, this makes for a more productive society and also a better one, right? So just, I kind of like to just take it down back to those first principles, right? So the emotion, I think that's tied sometimes to wanting to do good. It's like, well, in reality, what does this really look like, right? And what would you prefer? So even thinking of kind of a community like your household, right? There's certain expectations I have in my household, and then there are times where it's, you bend the rules or you make adjustments. So same thing in the business community. We need some safeguards. We need to know kind of guidelines, benchmarks, best practices. But then there's also times where you got to push the envelope and you got to challenge the narrative out there. And you got to, if you want to be an innovator, you really have to think outside the box and be willing to be a change agent.
Kimberlee, I love that you brought up the theory of moral sentiments. In the interests of full disclosure, I am the holder of an economics degree. I'm not the holder of a business degree, but I'm the holder of an economics degree. I was never assigned that book, and I never had a professor like you. And that's part of why I'm thrilled to be able to share you with the Bucknell community coming up in a few months. I have to ask you one question about geeking out on Adam Smith before we talk about your seminar next year. For somebody who may have gone to a college, any college, most of them don't assign a lot of Adam Smith, let alone the theory of moral sentiments as opposed to the Wealth of Nations, right? I mean, if you're going to get one Adam Smith book, you usually get the one that was written in 1776. So how would you briefly characterize the difference between those two books? What is unique about the theory of moral sentiments versus the Wealth of Nations?
Yeah, I would say with the theory of moral sentiments, it is trying to focus on, I would say the interworkings of society and social life. And really, so kind of that getting more into philosophy, a greater understanding of individuals. So it's still very much focused on individuals in action, right? And so you'd even say, right, so human action. So I'm also a fan of like Austrian economists and things like that. But going from then theory of moral sentiments, kind of where do our interests lie in regards to society? And then Wealth of Nations, more of the management of that, right? So how do we put that? How is it applicable? And how can we use it in a constructive way, right? But yeah, I actually do bring into class when we do talk about, socialism and capitalism, I bring in my copy of The Wealth of Nations, a big hefty book, and then I bring my printout of the Communist Manifesto, and but I do talk a lot about how Adam Smith, it really was a focus in terms of How do we not necessarily make a prosperous society, but how a prosperous society is kind of formed and evolves from one in which you have this spontaneous order of coordination. So that's going with Hazlitt and also Hayek, right? But how do you take the way in which people engage with one another, and also even why should we care, right? Like, why should I care about you and your family, right? If we are truly self-interested, well, the only way I'm going to really care is if I have a reason in regards to the benefit and the value sought, right? So my interest in human connection does have that component of, well, what is this relationship based off of, right? Which can be emotional, it can be, it's not always a tangible transaction, right? But Adam Smith, I would say, theory of moral sentiments more in terms of trying to understand us as humans, and then in terms of Wealth of Nations, how it's applicable and how it makes for a prosperous society and one that's managed in such a way. And now Adam Smith too, it wasn't always the biggest fan of business, right? So there was some caveats in there and some warnings, and I think that's good too, is to be aware of, okay, how does this dynamic play out? And so there's a lot to unpack there. I could probably start rambling a little bit too much, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to somebody who can differentiate one Adam Smith book from another. I tend to think of it as, everybody knows the invisible hand, even if they don't understand what it means, they've heard it.
Yeah.
That's really how the system works, and that's the Wealth of Nations. But
actually, let me just interject
sure,
one more
yeah.
thing. I have an article at AIER about Superman. So since we talked about movies, so
Yeah.
the newest Superman that came out, but I referenced the old one because that's my generation. But I talk about spontaneous order.
There you go.
And yeah, so if you check out that article, if any of the listeners check out that article, it kind of talks about how it's not necessarily the assigned seats and the ticket and all that sort of stuff. It's more my awareness of other audience members and being part of that movie going experience together that dictates my behavior more than, okay, this is your seat or these are, right? So I actually, full disclosure, I'm unethical. I sneak snacks into movies usually. So that's part of what's in that article. So I have some giveaways of what I do in the movie theater. But yeah, just had to give that plug there.
Well, that's great. And Kimberlee, I think you've given a great sketch through all of that, not just about topics that interest me, but about what it looks like for you to teach the difference between capitalism and socialism. I'm just delighted. I don't know how else to say it. I keep saying delighted and thrilled that you're going to bring that very material to my alma mater, Bucknell University, in early 2026. It's at the heart of your appointment as a visiting academic fellow. As I understand, it's going to be a 4-part series where you're going to take most of what you just talked about that you do in your classes at Lebanon Valley College. It'll be outside of class, an opportunity for students who really want to go deeper to look at the underpinnings of both systems and compare them on an academic basis and make up their own minds. Is that a good summary of what you'll be doing?
Yeah, that's perfect. And we'll try to have a lot of fun doing it too.
Sounds like it. All the Superman,
Yeah.
Karate Kid, and all that. You're going to make the alumni jealous. I mean, I'm going to get emails saying, "Can we have Kimberlee do the seminar on Zoom for those of us who didn't have the good fortune to be able to access it as college students?"
Oh, that's very nice of you. You're making me blush now. Thank you.
I think it's going to happen. I wish I'd had this experience as a college student. It's part of why I'm involved in ODC. I love giving what I see as gifts to college students. Having you come to Bucknell is a gift. Having Bill come to LVC was a gift. But also, selfishly, I wish I had you as a professor or someone like you, and I didn't. So now, all these years later, I get to sort of augment my education.
Oh, well, thank
self-interest.
you
there you go. Right, enlightened self-interest. I think.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate being able to talk about these things too, because as you know, which also I don't fully understand why it is a hot topic, but it is,
Yes.
right? And we have some real life cases playing out, present day. So it's an important topic and one that should be discussed.
Yes. Well, very, very, very much looking forward to it. I wanted to ask you one more question about your journey, Kimberlee, especially college students. I'm sure you see this in your class. they're always interested in how people got where they got, what choices they made. Was it a great big master plan? Was it the hand of Providence? So in terms of you, I know from having had some conversations with you, it wasn't necessarily your life's plan to become a business professor, to become an increasingly notable advocate for capitalism. How did it all happen?
Oh, well, and that's something that I always tell my students is don't focus so much on your passions because your passions are going to change. Focus on your interests. And as you accrue those experiences, it usually will lead you into a direction that then creates a passion, right? So I still feel like I'm evolving in regards to my career and what I'm pursuing. And even, I didn't start writing for Fee or AIER until really 2020. So I'm fairly new to even doing commentary and op-eds, and I'm loving it. I really enjoy it. But for my own career path, yeah, it was very sporadic. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I did know I had an interest in business. Actually, it was because when I was 14, so this is probably why I think of business people as heroes too. Is I read The Fountainhead and then Atlas Shrugged. And those were two books that really just inspired me in regards to entrepreneurship and just understanding the profit motive and the human being as a heroic being in their productive pursuits. So I think that was always somewhat in the back of my head. It wasn't necessarily why I chose to pursue a business major or even think to teach. Actually, what's kind of funny is in the early 2000s, I don't know if you ever heard of Samantha Brown. She was on the Travel Channel. And she would go around, and it was back when the Travel Channel just like first launched and it was new. Like now it's, we're aware, we've got the Food Network, we've got all different networks, right? But this was when the Travel Channel was first launched. And so Samantha Brown, I thought that's a cool job. She gets to go around, she gets to hang out in these different locations and talk about culture. So actually most of my graduate work is international policy studies and international relations. And I did do study abroad as an undergrad. And then I also did my master's and PhD internationally. So I always thought I was going to do something with travel. And if it was going to be in academia, it was going to be like a study abroad director. But I'm a capitalist, so I take where the money is, right? So when I got home, and actually in between then too, I had to make money in order to do these, my education experiences. So I had to save up money to pursue my master's and then save up again for, further, education. So I've worked in sales. I worked in Manhattan at Harry Winston. I did some on-air promotions for QVC. Actually, when I was pursuing my master's, I worked for an NGO. So I've done a whole bunch of odd jobs out there. I worked for a web marketing firm for a short period of time in Kutztown. But then when I finished up my first master's, I ended up getting a position at Temple and pursued a second master's then with Temple University and then went on for the PhD. But I worked in the dean's office, and they actually had a professor who I think kind of called off at the last minute, and they needed someone to teach this night course. And they were kind of in a bind, and the vice dean at the time, great guy. I just owe so much to him. But I remember him saying, Kimberlee, you have some graduate work under your belt. You're continuing your education. We have an international business course. You have a background in this. Would you like to do it? And I thought, will you pay me? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, I'll do it. Right. And I did it and I loved it. And then it snowballed. And then I continued on my education. And, so it really was just being in the right places at the right time, but inserting it, right? So making it known. These are my skill sets. And I think also, going back to transferable skills. So working at QVC and working in sales, like I got used to being in front of people and having to talk and also having to relay information. So things very unrelated to teaching, but helped me in this profession.
It's awesome. Awesome. Love hearing that. I think it's really great for students to hear that. Kimberlee, as you know, I have a little bit of a tradition on this podcast. There are 3 questions I ask every guest, and I'm going to close with those in your case. We can do a little bit of a lightning round and then finish the conversation.
You can see that if your audience is watching the screen, it looks like I'm glowing. The sun just came into my window, so I'm holding this up quick. Thinking, wow, this looks like I'm starting to light on fire here. Sorry.
She's just excited, folks. And the folks who are listening on Spotify will just be mystified, and it'll be our little fun.
Yes.
All right, so but we'll end with the three traditional questions for all the guests that you've probably seen and heard before. So first being, you've chosen to affiliate with Open Discourse Coalition as a visiting academic fellow. You said a little bit earlier about your philosophy on teaching your students how to think, not what to think. But we'd just love for you to speak a little more freely than I gave you the opportunity earlier. Why are you so passionate about our mission here?
I think what we need more of today is actually relationship building, right? And how do you start a relationship? It's by having a conversation. So I think just, and also even the sharing of thoughts. So what's happening in not only in business, but in our communities, coming up with new ways of doing things and new ideas. It's so important to just tease out different, I love brainstorming. I love just coming up with like, okay, what if we look at it this way? And what are, solving puzzles. And I feel like the more people who converse, the more you can kind of come up and collaborate and discuss ideas and potential new ways, thinking outside the box, things that you wouldn't have thought of. Like I use in my class, I love how the founder of Dyson, he came up with that idea while visiting a sawmill, right? So sometimes getting out of your own, your own little world and conversing with others can really create a lot of benefit that can have a ripple effect. So that's why, and also I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship, and I think what the Open Discourse Coalition is doing is very entrepreneurial. There's risks involved, there's investment, there's building it up, and so I find it very exciting. And I think education should come in a variety of forms, and so I support what it is that you're all doing.
Delighted to build out this entrepreneurial venture with you now, Kimberlee. Thank you. Okay, next question. What's a great book that you would recommend to our listeners?
This right now, I guess I would say, and given the kind of just the climate that we're in, Thomas Sowell's Conflict of Visions.
I was wondering if we'd come back to Thomas Sowell. Love it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his work. I already name dropped Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged if you want fiction, but I would say Conflict of Visions. And I'm working on my own book. I don't know, and I keep on plugging it away at it, but his concept of even surrogate decision making. So that's why it kind of is top of mind right now, because I do refer to that in my own work. But I think that's a powerful one. Those of your audience, any work by Mises, Hayek, I'm a fan of all that. Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson, obviously. But Thomas Sowell, really enjoy his work. Basic Economics, Conflict of Vision, yeah.
Yeah, I love that you bring Sowell up. His biographer, Jason Riley, was one of our early speakers. We actually had the husband and wife duo, Jason Riley and Naomi Schaefer Riley, on together. It was really cool.
Wow. You have an impressive list of contacts and a far-reaching network.
It's a joy to be able to share such individuals, including yourself, with students. Okay, last question, Kimberlee. Who's your favorite world historical figure?
It would be, and I know for some reason it really rubs people the wrong way sometimes, just because there are differences in even belief systems. But when it comes to my view of business, Ayn Rand, I would like to have a discussion with her in regards to just capitalism and really sticking within that realm. So I think a lot of times just people will project onto Rand, different things about her personal life or once again, her belief system. Whereas, as a philosopher and the understanding of economics, I just find so intriguing. And so I would like to, that would be the historic figure. If I could have dinner with someone, it would be Ayn Rand.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, a quick aside to our listeners. If you're a Bucknell student and you're intrigued by what you've heard today, register for Kimberlee's seminar. It'll be in January and February at the beginning of the next semester, again, on the difference between capitalism and socialism. It's going to be awesome. And if you're one of our other listeners and you're upset that you're no longer in college and that you can't hear this every day in class at Lebanon Valley or for a limited time only at Bucknell, well, she said she's a capitalist. So if you'd like part of her engagement to be teaching it online, call me up and we can talk about your next donation. With that, Kimberlee Josephson, a.k.a. Dr. J, thank you so much for being my guest on the Open Discourse podcast, and I look forward to seeing you at Bucknell very soon.
Thank you. I look forward to it as well.